last night, I think perhaps one of the most important things, and one of the things that people are concerned about, is that it has been harder to mobilize people this time around. There was a real sense, I think, by everybody that the repeal and replace initiative was dead in the water. And you saw Nancy and Chuck negotiate to clear the docket essentially in September, which has made this a little bit easier for the Republicans. Bernie Sanders announced his legislation, which he'd been holding off doing until the Protect the Affordable Care Act fight was over. And I think there was a lot of estimation that it was over by a lot of people. And you can see this just in terms of the demobilization by all the outside groups. And so everybody's trying to ramp it back up. It's with that backdrop. And, we spoke about this the last time when Jimmy Kimmel got into it with this guy, Cassidy, who just happens to be the co-sponsor of this bill. In fact, the co-writer of this bill. He actually writes it, but... And Kimmel did a pretty good job last time dealing with this. In some respects, I felt that he hadn't gone far enough. But last night, and, I usually don't stay up, but it was sort of teased and previewed. I thought what Jimmy Kimmel did in terms of this healthcare bill was really impressive. I mean, I think I may even understate it. This was let's listen to it.
I know you guys are going to find this hard to believe, but a few months ago, after my son had open heart surgery, which was something I spoke about on the air, a politician, a senator named Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, was on my show, and he wasn't very honest. It seemed like he was being honest. He got a lot of credit and attention for coming off like a rare, reasonable voice in the Republican Party when it came to health care, for coming up with something he called...
Pause it for one thing. I just want to tell you something about the networks. For years, decades now, the networks have a bit of a personality, and it is a function of who their audience is. Now, look, all networks all try and get the 18 to 34 crowd. But the reality is certain networks also, they go for ratings and just numbers. NBC is the more urban network of the big three, which is why you had all those runs of like those Jewier programs, why you get stuff like Will and Grace. ABC, or I should say CBS, has always been sort of a slightly older demographic across the country. And ABC has always been more heartland and blue-collarish. So you get things like big hits like Roseanne. And even Ellen became, that's why Ellen was so controversial, that it was on ABC in particular. And before she came out, her show was pretty sort of straight down the middle, sort of vanilla-y type of show. So understand still that there's a decent amount of truth to that. And so understand that when he has to say he came off sounding like a sane, reasonable Republican, he has to add on health care.
Right.
Because of the constraints that there's a lot of Republicans who watch ABC. Go ahead.
He called, and I didn't name it this, he named it this, the Jimmy Kimmel test, which was, in a nutshell, no family should be denied medical care, emergency or otherwise, because they can't afford it. He agreed to that. He said he would only support a health care bill that made sure a child like mine would get the health coverage he needs no matter how much money his parents make. And that did not have annual or lifetime caps. These insurance companies, they want caps to limit how much they can pay out. So, for instance, if your son has to have 3 open heart surgeries, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars apiece. If he hits his lifetime cap of, let's say, $1 million, the rest of his life, he's on his own. Now, our current plan protects him.
Just those words right there, I would be willing to wager that explanation of insurance caps has not been expressed on any news program, certainly not on a network news program, and I would imagine on the vast majority of cable news, you've never heard that simple explanation of caps or their existence. And dial it back a little bit because he's now, and he won't say the words Obamacare because of the context in which this is and the argument that he's making. But the fact is, until Obamacare, those caps were there, and most of us didn't realize it because most of us don't hit those caps. It's only when you need it is when it's not there. Good.
Dollars a piece. If he hits his lifetime cap of, let's say, $1 million, the rest of his life, he's on his own. Now, our current plan protects Americans from these caps and prevents insurance providers from jacking up the rates for people who have pre-existing conditions of all types. And Senator Cassidy said his plan would do that, too. He said all this on television many times.
As you present that, I asked, does it pass the Jimmy Kimmel test? Would the child born with a congenital heart disease be able to get everything she or he would need in that first year of life? I wanted to pass the Jimmy Kimmel test.
Okay, so last week, Bill Cassidy and Senator Lindsey Graham proposed a new bill, the Graham-Cassidy bill, and this new bill actually does pass the Jimmy Kimmel test, but a different Jimmy Kimmel test. With this one, your child with a pre-existing condition will get the care he needs if and only if his father is Jimmy Kimmel. Otherwise, you might be screwed. Now, I don't know what happened to Bill Cassidy, but when he was on this publicity tour, he listed his demands for a health care bill very clearly. These were his words. He said he wants coverage for all, no discrimination based on pre-existing conditions, lower premiums for middle-class families, and no lifetime caps. And guess what? The new bill does none of those things. Coverage for all? No. In fact, it'll kick about 30 million Americans off insurance. Pre-existing conditions? No. If the bill passes, individual states can let insurance companies charge you more if you have a pre-existing condition. You'll find that little loophole later in the document after it says they can't. They can and they will. But will it lower premiums? Well, in fact, for lots of people, the bill will result in higher premiums. And as far as no lifetime caps go, the states can decide on that, too, which means there will be lifetime caps in many states. So not only
Pause it for 1 second. All right, so there he is. He's gone through this thing. He's even brought up the fact, and we've seen Cassidy on the news claiming that Jimmy Kimmel's wrong. It says right there that in the document that we will protect those who have pre-existing conditions. Well, Kimmel makes the point that hey, if you go deeper in the document, it then says they're going to leave it up to the states. And we know that a huge portion of the states in this country have already decided not to accept Medicaid. The idea that they're not going to capitulate to insurance companies' wet dream of returning to a time where we can deny those people who we think are more likely to need health care? Of course not. And so Kimmel lays it out very well here. All right, continue.
Lifetime caps go, the states can decide on that, too, which means there will be lifetime caps in many states. So not only did Bill Cassidy fail the Jimmy Kimmel test, he failed the Bill Cassidy test. He failed his own test. And you don't see that happen very much. This bill he came up with is actually worse than the one that, thank God, Republicans like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and John McCain torpedoed over the summer. And I hope they have the courage and good sense to do that again with this one, because these other guys who claim they want Americans to have better health care, even though 8 years ago they didn't want anyone to have health care at all, they're trying to sneak this scam of a bill they cooked up in without an analysis from the Bipartisan Congressional Budget Office. They don't even want you to see it. They're having one hearing. The hearings, I read the hearings being held in the Homeland Security Committee, which has nothing to do with health care, and the chairman agreed to allow two witnesses, Bill Cassidy and Lindsey Graham, to speak. So listen, health care is complicated. It's boring. I don't want to talk about it. The details are confusing, and that's what these guys are relying on. They're counting on you to be so overwhelmed with all the information, you just trust them to take care of you, but they're not taking care of you. They're taking care of the people who give them money, like insurance companies, and we're all just looking at our Instagram accounts and liking things while they're voting on whether people can afford to keep their children alive or not. Most of the Congress people who vote on this bill probably won't even read it, and they want us to do the same thing. They want us to treat it like an iTunes service agreement. And this guy, Bill Cassidy, just lied right to my face. Do you believe that every American, regardless of income, should be able to get regular checkups, maternity care, et cetera, all of those things, that people who have health care get and need?
Yep.
So yep is Washington for nope, I guess.
Oh boy, and he goes on, but that's the gist of it. Well, that's 5 minutes on national television, which of course is going to it's replayed over and over again today, and he knows that. And I don't know. That may be the only political thing that Jimmy Kimmel does in his career. But if we could get every late night host to make one stand on one hugely important issue, then we'd all be in much better shape.
Or Emmy hosts.
Or Emmy hosts, for that matter. I know, I'm mad about Colbert and that Sean Spicer thing. But so good for Jimmy Kimmel. Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos